All right, let's get into this. Let's dig into this bitch. As promised, this is going to be my in-depth look at the main event of UFC 270. Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gane, and there's lots of shit that I want to say about this fight. Yeah, Fenyu and Dan have released a full preview for the card. They preview the entire pay-per-view from top to bottom. Every fight, every single fight is broken down in depth on that podcast, so go ahead and listen to it. I, on the other hand, am going to concern myself only with the main event because there's some details that I would like to point out that may be missed on some other pods, or I mean by sheer virtue of Fenyu and Dan covering the entire card. So, and there's also the Forbidden Technique podcast, our new show about MMA. Silas and Christian have dug into the more compelling matchups on that upcoming card, so certainly check it out. They both have a really good eye for the sport. They're really smart blokes. And well, me personally, I'm going to say some things that's about Cyril Gane in particular that are liable to piss off everyone who is on that particular bandwagon, so I'm just gonna get this out of the way right away. Right out of the gate, I'm gonna admit that I'm rooting for Francis Ngannou. And there's there are multiple reasons for it. I'm fully admitting my bias, and it's just that there is a plethora of misconceptions about Cyril Gane, and everyone seems to assume certain things about him that I just do not see. Over the process of studying him and watching him fight in the UFC, I do not see in him the technician that is going to save heavyweight. And conversely, I see the technician in Francis Ngannou. Crazily enough, because we all know the memes about Francis Ngannou, and Francis Ngannou is just this mindless brawler. He's only got power going for him. That's the only thing that's propping him up. Yada yada yada. I disagree with all of that. And so if this makes you want to turn this podcast off right now, then certainly do that. Feel free to turn it off and listen instead to the, I suppose, more unbiased or more measured take on the fight. I'm going to do my best to provide analysis for what I think will be the more probable outcomes in this fight, how the fight will play out. I will try and explore each dynamic in depth, and I'm going to try and back up every statement with what I believe to be, well, the closest approximation of what could be facts. I'm not going to try and fact and logic this whole thing. This is not what I do. I disagree with that notion at all, in principle. Because, fight analysis is largely subjective. Because you cannot trust the analytics data, the statistics that FightMetric provides. You can use them provided you understand the context in which they should be used. If you combine the statistics with the actual footage, then you may approximate, you may approach something that could be the closest approximation of what actually happened. We've talked about this on all the previous pods on the nature of analysis, how to communicate analysis, and all that kind of stuff. So this is what I'm going to do. You cannot be 100% objective. You can just try and be less subjective than you would otherwise have otherwise been if you were to simply state your opinions. And what I'm going to do is state my opinions and try to back them up. Okay. And I'm also going to try and address certain feedback that I've received from both fans of the podcast, mere listeners of the podcast. Well, not mere listeners, just casual listeners who tune in to hear me prattle on about fights. And certain other unconnected parties that have heard my views on Cyril Gane and Francis Ngannou and any given fighter, and disagreed with me, disagreed either with the exact phrasing that I frequently use, and the exact the sum of the statements that I make on the regular. So I guess another disclaimer would be that I'm gonna try and dissect certain statements that I hear going around, and I am by no means a native speaker of English language. It's not my native language, and granted, my understanding of certain words and certain concepts in the might be lacking in the English language, and so if I'm gonna misconstrue certain concepts and statements and phrases, etc., then I apologize in advance. But if you're still with me, let's get into it. Let's break this whole thing down. The reason why I root for Francis Ngannou in particular is, first of all, there's an emotional, personal reason, is that I simply find his life story incredibly compelling and inspiring and heartrending in certain things, regarding certain things that happened to him while he, the way he grew up, the way he left his home country, the way he had to cross a desert and endure all sorts of horrible occurrences and tragedies and the various roadblocks that he's faced. There's also this whole narrative around him, the way the UFC tried to strong-arm him into accepting a fight immediately after getting the belt from Stipe Miocic in a performance of a lifetime. It was an amazing performance, incredible career turnaround, massive improvement on all fronts. Just that performance blew me away. Sure, to a certain extent, it can be argued that perhaps Stipe Miocic is simply not the same person anymore. Perhaps he has beaten a diminished version of Stipe Miocic, and certainly, yes, there is a distinct possibility that this may be the case. But it would be I would be remiss not to heap praise upon Francis Ngannou for managing to turn in such a just a really flawless performance, pretty much just across the board, just zero mistakes, some wonkiness here and there, but then again, he was trying to fight like a functional MMA fighter for the first time in his career. Certainly for the first time in the UFC, so that is to be commended. Beyond that, I think this criticism of him and this idea of him as a brawler, as a just dumb brawler with no nuance that is only being carried by his power, I think this no longer holds true. I think this is no longer correct to do that. I think it's no longer correct to continue doing that. And sure, we may yet see another like psyched out version of Ngannou in this fight. Gane certainly possesses certain attributes that may make Ngannou either sloppy or incredibly passive, as like the version that we saw against Derek Lewis. It's entirely possible. It's certainly a possibility. As for Cyril Gane, I've received multiple comments, especially after the Heavy Hands appearance, where I've stated I've made my displeasure with his performance against Derek Lewis clear. There have been certain trends that I saw about him that I find to be I feel like they do not belong in a fighter that he's touted as being. This composed, peerless technician at heavyweight, the first true technical fighter at heavyweight, all that kind of stuff. I do not agree with it. The fighter that I saw across multiple fights in the UFC is a completely different fighter. He's not that. That is it is a firmly held belief of mine, and I will stick to it. There has been a particular comment has stuck in my memory. It's stuck in my mind. I've been accused of having a contrarian bias. So, I mean, once again, I'm not a native speaker. Maybe that is accepted parlance in the English language, but I find this statement to be nonsensical. There is no such thing as a contrarian bias, because a contrarian bias is just simply a bias. It's just a bias. I'm simply biased against Cyril Gane, and I admit that I am biased against Cyril Gane. But there's a reason for that. There's multiple very good reasons for why I am biased against Cyril Gane. And as for being a contrarian, what is a contrarian, first of all? The way I understand it, a contrarian is someone who does things out of spite, the one who says things in order to spite the other party, in order to instigate a negative emotional reaction in the person that they're speaking to. And that is not my intention. I do not set out to annoy anyone or humiliate anyone or to go on a rant where I belittle and insult and question the intelligence of people who hold certain beliefs. I simply I have the opinions I have because this is what I see. This is what I think. I do not let other people's perception of things to affect my own personal views, because they would cease to be my own personal views. It would simply be a reaction. I'm not trying to be reactionary here. Certainly, I may anticipate certain opinions. I may anticipate certain opinions being expressed in my presence or in response to my statements, and I may try and cut them off and clarify things so as not to be misunderstood. And this is what I'm trying to do right now, as it should have been made perfectly clear in the beginning. And so I am biased against Cyril Gane because simply I do not like his style. I do not find it compelling. And I fundamentally disagree with the principle of the style. I think the things that Francis Ngannou has shown in his rematch with Stipe Miocic is how a fighter should develop. And it's the kind of style that I would like to see more at heavyweight, which is fundamental, basic MMA competency. I am against gimmicks. I dislike quote-unquote meme styles, and I dislike quote-unquote meme techniques. I admit that they have place in MMA, provided they're built into a fundamentally sound style of fighting, something that Petr Yan does. And I've been accused multiple times of being boring, or for liking boring fighters, or simply liking fighters who are just simply the best in the world. And I mean, yes, because looking at fighters who are the best in the world is much, much more interesting than just latching on to certain gimmicks. It's more interesting to me. For example, I would freely admit to enjoying Robert Whittaker fights much more than I enjoy Kevin Holland fights, for the simple reason that Robert Whittaker is one of the best fighters in the world. I don't think I don't understand what's wrong with that. It's just, I like good things and I want more of them. I want better things and I want better MMA. And I believe that basic, fundamental, and depthful MMA acumen is the way to go. And certainly, employing a style that Cyril Gane employs is completely viable in MMA, especially at heavyweight. It's a completely viable style. It works. He's beating people with it. Except that I think that the way his style is much better expressed in fighters like Petr Yan and Robert Whittaker, because Petr Yan is also a very adept switch hitter, and Robert Whittaker utilizes the same bouncy style of footwork and lancing jabs and in and out movement, and he utilizes it to a much more depthful and much more varied and nuanced degree. This is all I think. That's, and I would like, and certainly if Cyril Gane develops in that direction and starts showcasing the same level of acumen, maybe not exactly the same. I mean, after all, it's heavyweight, and fighters fight according to the level of skill in their division, in their respective division, and it makes total sense. And it would make total sense if Gane were to beat Francis Ngannou this weekend, and if he would to continue fighting the same way he fights now and would continue acquiring wins, that would be perfectly fine. Cyril Gane gets paid, he accumulates title defenses, there's a title reign, there's a clear champion at the top of the division that is certainly very good relative to the rest of his opposition. I'm not against that, it's just that I wouldn't find it all that interesting, simply due to his style, due to the nature of his style, and due to the nature of the opposition that he's going to face. Because, as we all know, and it's something that it's a statement that drew criticism and continues to draw criticism from MMA fans, is that we at the fight side tend to be fairly cynical when it comes to the level of skill at heavyweight, because the common counter argument is that it's heavyweights, they're huge, it's much harder to acquire the same level of skill that you may see at the lower weight divisions. And my response to that is watch other sports. Check out other more well-established sports like wrestling, kickboxing, and just plain boxing. And the heavyweights there, the highly touted heavyweights there, their level of skill isn't all that far removed from the level of skill that you see at the lower weight classes. Certainly they're not as quick. There's not that deep of a talent pool, naturally, because the big men usually get snatched up by other more well-paying sports such as basketball and football and rugby, etc. I do not dispute that. But I do not think that is that I'm overstepping when I'm trying to advocate for a more critical assessment of skill at heavyweight. I don't think I'm overstepping when I'm advocating for people to be more critical of heavyweights in general, because criticism doesn't come from it. For me, at the very least, I'm not doing this because I hate MMA or because I enjoy snarking about MMA or because I enjoy saying that the thing that you enjoy and hold dearly to your heart is bad. Do not derive any enjoyment from it. I may enjoy coming up with clever wordplays or coming up with funny jokes in order to make my friends laugh. But I'm not trying to go out of my way to shit on people. I just want better things. That's why I criticize things. That's why you criticize all things. That's because you're disappointed and want something more. And I don't believe that I'm entitled for that. I don't think that I am an entitled person in general. Obviously, the listeners may disagree, and people that interact with me may disagree with that, but that's how I feel. And I think that as a customer, as a viewer of a spectacle sport, as a viewer of entertainment media, that it is my right to ask for better things. That's all there is to it. Okay, back to Cyril Gane. Cyril Gane, the way people view him and what his actual style consists of. And Cyril Gane, I suppose I'm assuming that Cyril Gane subsists on protein, fatty acids, and carbohydrates, etc. This is why I constantly talk about the English language not being my native language, because I still make mistakes like this. Okay, Cyril Gane. There's Cyril Gane, the actual fighter, and Cyril Gane, the idea of a fighter. The idea of Cyril Gane, a composed, patient, skillful, masterful outfighter with a lancing jab, nice side kicks, peerless control of distance, fighter that is equally potent from both stances and exploits this fact willingly, and adeptly and is very good at everything that he does. The only criticism is from dummies that do not understand the nuance of his game, the nuance of his style. Every Cyril Gane fight is a chess match, and he's the grandmaster of MMA. And everyone who faces him is befuddled by his craft. And when you actually look at the fights, Cyril Gane has faced a position that is, quite frankly, it's poor. And I do not fault him for that, because the level of opposition at heavyweight in the UFC is just, that's what it is. It's just poor. And that's why Francis Ngannou has been able to just run through the division and knock everyone dead without really, like, facing any type of opposition that would make him adapt, until he faced Stipe Miocic. Stipe Miocic made Francis Ngannou adapt and improve. And Stipe Miocic was pretty much the last great heavyweight that was actually, like, functional and fundamentally sound. We'll get into it later. Cyril Gane. Hold on. Let's actually look at the fighters that he's faced in his run so far. Okay, UFC. His UFC debut, Rafael Pessoa, won by arm triangle choke in the first round at the last seconds of the first round. What actually happened? Pessoa attempted to initiate grappling with Gane, pretty much took himself down, and then Cyril Gane just sort of squeezed. It wasn't even a full arm triangle choke. The arm triangle choke that you should do, that should be performed correctly, is that you slap on the arm triangle, then you adjust your position so that you create pressure. You actually adjust your foot positioning, assume side control, and then you start pressing, and the pressure results in the submission. Here, I think he was stuck in half guard, and he just squeezed. And certainly this speaks to the strength of Cyril Gane, his athleticism, and Cyril Gane has styled on the Rafael Pessoa on the feet. But the bottom line is that Rafael Pessoa wasn't all that great. High-level fighters shouldn't react to... Rafael Pessoa did nothing. He just flopped to his back and then conceded the arm triangle and then tapped. That's all. That's literally it. People talk about him being a black belt, and they can talk about him being a black belt all they want, but a black belt is a black belt is a black belt. There are certain levels of black belt. There's different schools. Certain schools are more willing to hand out black belts, and being a huge guy, training BJJ, big fat guys out there, you know. I know. I'm over 200 pounds, and there are certain positions out of which I can just strength my way out. Of, because purely as a function of my size. Dante O'May's submission heel hook, styled for 3 rounds, then got him with a heel hook. Dante O'May's tried swinging, tried swanging, tried banging, simply was outclassed, did not have any functional boxing or kickboxing or anything else, gassed very badly, and Cyril Gane basically acted as a training dummy for Cyril Gane, as a heavy bag, and then Cyril Gane decided to submit him with a heel hook for kicks. And the exhausted and battered Dante Almeida, who I presume doesn't actually know how to deal with heel hooks, I think it's a fair assumption, tapped. Okay. Decision, Tanner Boser. 3 rounds. Unanimous decision. Tanner Boser. Everyone talked about him being the hot new prospect, and sure, he's one of those, like, fatty with the fast hands type archetypes, and didn't offer anything interesting to Cyril Gane, was befuddled by his style, by his stance switches, and once again, it was I suppose, a fairly conservative but nonetheless winning performance. Junior Dos Santos got TKO'd with an elbow, and I mean, this is Junior Dos Santos in the year 2019. Junior Dos Santos is done. He's a professional wrestler now, and the Junior Dos Santos that that just styled all over Mark Hunt has been long gone at this point. Cyril Gane didn't even have to pressure him. He just kicked him up and then elbowed him, and then Junior Dos Santos started up a stink about it being to the back of the head. Whatever. Rosenstrike decision, Volkov decision, nothing too interesting to say about it outside of this being 5-round fights, and that Cyril Gane seems to be able to maintain a pace over 5 rounds. Granted, those fights were way less high volume than the previous outings from Cyril Gane, because purely by virtue of through the nature of his opponents. Jairzinho Rosenstrike is kind of like, he's a dangerous puncher, but he doesn't do much of anything. And there's the threat of his power. You suppose you can justify Cyril Gane by the fact that I guess he was cautious. And Volkov is just lanky and annoying and just plain hard to deal with because he's huge. And then we approached Derek Lewis, and Derek Lewis just gave up. But there's one thing, that's the last performance is the most damning one for me. Rather. And I've spoken about this at length, both on the Heavy Hands podcast and the MMA podcast, I believe. I mean, this was the worst possible matchup for Derek Lewis, and still Derek Lewis has been able to pressure Cyril Gane to the fence with no footwork by just walking forward. And everyone talks about the professed adeptness of Cyril Gane when it comes to ring craft, and I do not see it. Cyril Gane has the Alexander Gustafsson type ring craft, where he would just turn his back and run out. He would turn his back and jog out of danger if you press him to the fence. And pressing him to the fence doesn't take all that much. Derek Lewis, no offense, just stumbling forward, tired, battered, stumbling forward. Cyril Gane still got pressed to the fence, and it's a really, really alarming look. Because we all know how Francis Ngannou knocked out Rosenstrike. He just ran at him, throwing bungalows. And with that kind of footwork, when you just turn your back and just run out, I don't think it's a good idea against Cyril Gane, against Francis Ngannou. I'm sorry. It would not be a good idea for Cyril Gane to employ this type of ringcraft against Francis Ngannou. That's one thing. The other thing that you may have noticed in those fights, if you go back and watch those fights, is that Cyril Gane has an atrocious right hand. He does not have any finishing threat, when it comes to his boxing at least. He has powerful body kicks. He has yet to exhibit his a willingness to high kick, or at least whenever he high kicks, it's mostly a slap on the guard, and then he rams in the body kick. Certainly an avenue, certainly a way to hurt Francis Ngannou, but also fairly dangerous because it opens him up for a counter. The way he does it, he throws really, really hard body kicks, but he does it off stunt switches and constant stunt switches in front of your opponent, opening you up for a counter. And those outings, those more conservative decisions that he's got, are mostly a side effect of his lack of finishing instinct, in my eyes. Sure, he's finished Rafael dos Anjos. Fuck's sake. Junior Dos Santos, I'm sorry. I'm kind of hungover, as usual, so bear with me. But those are... I hate the expression, exception that proves the rule. What I want to say is that those are singular moments in a career that is characterized by Cyril Gane building and building and building offense, mounting offense, and not following up with power shots. At least to the head. He's one of those heavyweights. He has a peculiarity at heavyweight. He's a heavyweight that likes pot shotting. And a heavyweight that likes throwing volume. And it's a viable style. It's perfectly viable, but in the current heavyweight meta, where once you cross that 200-pound threshold, it doesn't really necessarily have to have a really huge, powerful right hand. It just has to have a right hand that he throws in a straight line. The way he throws it, it's like a rainbow overhand that frequently connects on the shoulder, on the guard, anything else out besides the head and the body. He could have thrown it to the body, would have been nice. But generally speaking, my problem with him is that his footwork, it's a problem of one extra step. The footwork that I prefer seeing in fighters is careful, measured footwork where you take tiny steps to adjust your position so that you always remain in a position to throw powerful shots. And Cyril Gane certainly may have been able to develop that if he were to. He could keep his style, he could throw jabs, he could throw side kicks, and then stand his ground and throw a straight counter. And that would granted him so many finishes just right now. It's the same thing that Robert Whittaker showcased against Calvin Gastelum. It's just that he didn't knock out Calvin Gastelum because Calvin Gastelum has, he's as the old saying goes, he's a big old Mexican with a big old head. The point still stands. It's a very viable way to fight. And yeah, it's just, for instance, Cyril Gane to me is like, he kind of seems like an unfinished product. There's a problem, he has problems in the pocket, he's not very potent in the pocket, doesn't have a tight left hook, doesn't have a tight right hand, doesn't have much of a defense beyond just putting his hands up, because he spends much of the fight way on the outside with his hands down, hanging around by his waist, and he kind of like pulls them up when he's in danger. And I guess that's fine up to a certain point. Not when you're facing Francis Ngannou, who has showcased an ability to exchange in the pocket and throw really, really tight left hooks. Also, it's Francis Ngannou. And the thing that everyone brings up is that, they used to be teammates. And there's a short clip of Cyril Gane lancing Francis Ngannou up with jabs and kicks and just styling on him. And the thing is, sparring footage is so trying to glean information about the fight from sparring footage is a crapshoot. It's a very unreliable way to judge fighters. Because what is sparring? Sparring is where you learn things. Sparring is where you sharpen up your skills. Muhammad Ali notoriously looked like shit in sparring. He let all his sparring partners to beat him up because he wanted to put those rounds in. He wanted to see if he can weather the storm a bit. See if he can, how he behaves himself in uncomfortable situations. He willingly put himself in uncomfortable situations in which he looked like shit in order to improve in those uncomfortable positions. Because sparring is training. Sparring is what you do to train and develop skill. Naturally, Cyril Gane, who is a reasonably accomplished Muay Thai fighter on the regional scene, on the regional French scene, a fairly skillful kickboxer, naturally he would piece Francis Ngannou up in training, especially if it's light sparring. Because when you're a puncher, when you spar, you don't want to lean on your power in order to spar, because that just defeats the purpose of sparring. It's also very rude, because you don't want to hurt your sparring partner. So naturally, Francis Ngannou held back and tried to figure out ways in which he could kickbox with Cyril Gane. And naturally, he lost. So sparring can mean two different things. Either sparring is just what happens and what will happen in the fight, or either it just paints a completely false picture, a reverse of what will actually happen. Beyond that, Francis Ngannou has left that gym. He no longer trains there. He's a different fighter now. He spars with different fighters, trains with different people, has a different training regime now. That's what I assume, at the very least. So stuff like sparring, it can easily throw you off. You have to keep it in the back of your mind when you're thinking about the fight, but you shouldn't put too much stock in it. So because like the way I picture Ngannou in training, based on his attributes and on his style, Ngannou is probably super sluggish at certain points and can sometimes catch you off guard with his quickness. But in actual fights, we've all seen how lightning quick Ngannou really is. Boy can explode. He may be... he's not fleet-footed the way Cyril Gane is. He's not light on the feet. He's kind of a bit of a plodder. But his hand speed, still very impressive. Beyond that, according to Eric Nixick, Francis Ngannou's trainer, head coach, his new head coach, and our grappling analyst and interviewer Ben Cohn actually conversed with Eric Nixick, and according to him, I don't remember if it was on the actual interview itself or it was like behind the scenes, but according to Eric Nixick, Francis Ngannou is now he has now fallen in love with wrestling. He loves wrestling now, and he really enjoys rolling around on the ground and drilling positions and just wrestle fucking people. And so it's a new development. It's a new avenue through which he can attack Cyril Gane now. Cyril Gane, from what we've seen, decent-ish takedown defense. He hasn't been shot on by very accomplished heavyweight wrestlers, someone like Stipe Miocic, for example, or even Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier is retired. Stipe Miocic is has one foot out the door. Don't know whether we'll see that fight in the future, and it's irrelevant to this matchup because we haven't seen it. So kind of a blank slate. Knows how to dig underhooks at the very least. Knows how to wall walk, I suppose. Wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility. But back to the original point, why I am biased against Cyril Gane's style and why I am rooting for Francis Ngannou in this fight. I think Francis Ngannou, with his athleticism and his attributes and his seeming focus, he is seemingly focused on developing a fundamentally sound, sort of like a basic, functional, competent MMA game. I think this type of fighting style is what we need in the heavyweight division presently, because it leaves less margin for error. The basics are basics for a good reason. They leave less room for error. And Cyril Gane's style does not. It's unorthodox, it's unconventional, it's awkward, it throws you off, but with the way Cyril Gane has been able to... That's the thing about Cyril Gane. He has been able to get away with things. Francis Ngannou also, but I believe since he is now focused on improving, we're not going to see it all that much in the future, or at least his ability to get away with things will prop up his style even further, as opposed to Cyril Gane, who... It's kind of like a... I'm not saying that Cyril Gane is like Muhammad Ali, but Muhammad Ali's style was predicated on his attributes, and he was able to get away with unorthodox things because he was so fast, so durable, and he got clattered quite often, despite the fact that he's had good reflexes, and his entire defense was predicated upon those reflexes. And once he got slower, he started getting hit more often, and he started relying on his chin. But he went back to basics and started trying to power punch more. He danced less, and he relied on the clinch way more often. So I suppose this is another avenue for Cyril Gane to adapt, in that he could develop a really good clinch game. Anyway, Francis Ngannou with a more functional, more basic style, it won't be him relying strictly on his attributes, it would be more of him leveraging those attributes, and this is just something that I prefer personally. I think it's more intelligent and it's kind of cooler from a subjective standpoint, I guess. I'm not trying to justify my biases based on facts, I'm just trying to explain my reasoning to you. Once again, trying to nail the point home here. I apologize if it comes across as I'm being condescending to you. No, it's not my intention. Maybe it's my tone. I don't know. Maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe. I'm just blunt I'm incredibly blunt, and this is the type of speaking style that you will find very common in Russia. That's just how it is. We're a rude people. But Cyril Gane has been able to get away with things because of the quality of his opposition and the talent pool at heavyweight. What do I mean by that? He hasn't met anyone who could consistently punish his stunt switches with either pressure, counters, or good, consistent, solid leg-kicking offense. Hasn't faced competent wrestlers either. Hasn't faced who wouldn't be discouraged by his pot-shotting offense and would just walk forward and throw power shots. Hasn't faced anyone like that up until this point. Francis Ngannou also largely met overmatched opponents and has been able to just run at people and knock them out, right, like he did with Rosenstruck. Knocked out two chinny people in a row. And then when he met his first stiff stylistic test in Stipe Miocic, he got exposed. But what people forget about this beating that he took from Stipe Miocic, this styling that Stipe Miocic has unleashed upon him, people kind of forget about the fact that Francis kind of lost that fight because he just got tired. He just threw his entire gas tank away in the first round, and then, while super tired, he was still able to get up from underneath Stipe Miocic, who's a very competent top player from his folk style experience, a very competent wrestler, extremely powerful puncher. Let me restate this. Let me reframe this. Francis Ngannou has met one of the most thunderous punchers in the history of the heavyweight division, took his shots for 5 rounds while dead tired, without being able to see any of the shots coming because of his fatigue, wildly out of position in almost every exchange. His feet were not under him, and he's just straight up could not see shit coming or take the sting of punches by rolling with him, and he still ate them all like nothing, and was still fine after this. He got wailed on by one of the most powerful punchers in the history of the division for 5 fucking rounds, for God's sake. Everyone forgets that he has the boy has a beard on him. Absolute cheater attributes. Insane chin. Actually decent gas tank for his size and power and his ability to explode. So if Ngannou actually figures out this whole thing of using the threat of his power and using feints to maintain a pace and dictate exchanges and save up his energy, he'd basically be unbeatable, and we also saw his improved takedown defense against Stipe Miocic. Actually use the whizzer. I mean, and try to wrestle offensively. Come on. Also actually had some decent success with it. Hit a nice go behind. Kind of got overzealous and tried to shoot a double, which didn't work, but he's had the sense to abandon it early. So there's that. Very encouraging signs. That whole performance. I'm kind of predicating my excitement about Francis Ngannou on this entire performance. He's liable to disappoint me. Not denying that at all. But this entire fight, has the potential to be either really, really dull or really, really exciting in both ways. Really dull on both accounts, from both fighters. Really exciting from both fighters. Or just really, really, really fucking stupid. It could be really fucking dumb. I'm not denying that. But what I'm trying to say here, provided Francis Ngannou wins, And provided he decides to stay in the UFC and not leave the UFC, because there have been very prominent contract disputes about payment and all that kind of stuff. The way that the UFC tried to strong arm him into accepting the fight, the way the way they essentially coronated Cyril Gane to set him up to become their assassin for hire, to get rid of this pesky little guy from bumfuck nowhere who wants to tell them what he wants to do, has the goal to actually demand respect and payment according to his station. Oh, Dana White, he's been so generous in giving Francis Ngannou a job after he grew up in Cameroon and lived on the streets, etc. And that's one other thing that I frequently see being mentioned, is that Ngannou is somehow ungrateful for having left his original gym. After all, they gave him a roof under which he could sleep and taught him all he knows, and how he forgot all about all that. And hasn't shown any gratitude. First of all, I do not fault any fighter for leaving the gym and moving on for greener pastures. It's just perfectly natural. It's rational. You, as a professional athlete, it is in your interest to seek ways to improve your skill in order to become a better professional fighter, subsequently securing your prospects of getting more fights and winning more fights, and securing your future financially, and securing a good sporting legacy. I see no problem with it. The whole thing with TJ and Cody, TJ saw that he could improve much better with Dwayne Bang Ludwig, left Team Alpha Male, trained with Bang Ludwig, won the fights against Cody without much issue, because he just got better. Conor McGregor could benefit a lot from actually switching camps, though I suppose it's it's too little too late to do that, because he's not learning anything useful at Straight Blast Gym. And if you were to listen to what John Kavanagh says about fighting, it doesn't strike me as something that a competent coach would say. Let's put it at that. No, let's leave it at that. Let's put it this way. Okay, back to the thing. Back to my excitement about Ngannou being a long-reigning champion at heavyweight. Look at the way Stipe Miocic kind of set Francis Ngannou up for that improvement. Stipe Miocic actually raised the bar. There were a lot of eyes on his fights against Daniel Cormier, and there were a lot of eyes on his fight against Francis Ngannou. He kind of indirectly could have created this effect where he kind of raised the stock of heavyweight in MMA. Kind of the same effect that Fyodor Emelianenko had on the division. And Krokop and Minotauro Nogueira and other figures like that. Figures like that set a bar that you need to clear in order to become champion. In order to hang in there with the elites. In order to at least hang in there with the champion himself. So naturally this creates a situation where fighters just improve in order to beat the guy at the top. This is what happens in healthy divisions with good, long-reigning champions. People like Jose Aldo. So if Francis Ngannou, with his attributes, with his insane power, insane chin, and basic competency in all areas of MMA, he could create a situation in which guys, some certain people, certain big guys would be interested in testing themselves against that. Because in order to beat Ngannou that is competent, just has basic fundamental competency in MMA, you would also have to be basic and competent in MMA. You would actually have to be a functional fighter with good attributes. Either that, you would either have to have athletic parity with him and higher skill level, or better attributes at a decent skill level. And try picturing that kind of person. I mean, just sends shivers down your spine, doesn't it? The idea of a fighter like that, an enormous, gigantic guy who could beat a Francis Ngannou who has mastered MMA. I mean, come on. And beyond, or at the very least, if the situation doesn't improve, at least we get a string of very entertaining fights, very entertaining finishes. It's going to be like the bum of the going to be like the bum of the month club with Joe Louis, where he would just knock out random guys in exciting fashion with good technique, or just bonk them. That could be also fun. It could also be very fun, as it's not going to be the same circus that was heavyweight MMA for the past, 15 years, maybe 20. So I'm on that train. And if Cyril Gane shows improvement and comes up with a really good game plan to beat an actually fundamentally competent Francis Ngannou, I would be very much impressed indeed. Everything that I've just said about Cyril Gane and how I would like to see Francis Ngannou at the top, I would swallow my words, heap praise upon Cyril Gane. I'm just gonna do that because I've done that before. In 2019, back when I started doing this whole thing, we wrote staff picks for Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje, and I did not try to cover up the fact that I was rooting for Justin Gaethje very, very hard. Justin Gaethje is one of my favorite fighters, one of my most favorite fighters ever. And I was noticing certain holes in Khabib Nurmagomedov's game, and I wanted to see those habits and flaws be tested by a good competitor. I wanted to see a good competitive matchup, if not a victory. I wasn't exactly like... I would have been glad if Justin Gaethje got the win in an impressive fashion. That would have been cool to see. But the way Khabib Nurmagomedov adapted to Justin Gaethje and just dismantled him impressed me so much that subsequently I released an entire breakdown of the fight where I just spent the entire podcast doing nothing but heaping praise upon Khabib Nurmagomedov. And there were some caveats where I talked about what ifs, when I talked about the way that Justin Gaethje could have fought that fight. But I do not let my personal investment in certain fighters to just get sort of like cloud my judgment in the way where I come off as bitter and annoyed and just refuse to give credit where credit is due. I do not do that. And if Cyril Gane beats Francis Ngannou in an exciting fashion, then I would not shy away from praising that. Conversely, if he beats him in a boring fashion, I would not shy away from saying that the fight was boring because, I mean, I was bored watching that fight. What do you expect me to say? To kind of like pretend that I was very excited? No, I'm not going to do that. Or if Francis Ngannou beats Cyril Gane boringly, I would just shit on him for being boring. I would not try to justify anything. I mean, that's not what I do. And, I mean, most of all, like, chiefly, I do not want the fight to be boring, like, full stop. I do not like boring fights. I don't want to see a boring fight. And the reason why I'm so excited about this matchup is that Cyril Gane is one of the better heavyweights. Francis Ngannou has the potential to be a really great heavyweight. And, I mean, they both have the potential to be really great heavyweights. It's just that I prefer one prospect to another. And prospect not in the sense that an up-and-coming fighter, but just future developments. I find one future development to be more exciting than the other. But if Cyril Gane proves to be competent enough with his unorthodox style and actually develops his unorthodox style in interesting and crafty ways, where he would start doing really cool shit like throwing exciting wheel kick combos, like high kicking people and like throwing elbows, messing people up with elbows and you're just fucking them up in the clinch, dominating them and grappling, and if he starts doing all those cool things, then I would be fully on board. It's just that I'm not on board yet. That's all there is to it. Not trying to shit on anyone's parade, it's just what I think right now, presently. For now, I just find the prospect of Francis Ngannou just more, like, I generally find Francis Ngannou more fun and interesting to me personally. That's it. But the fight itself, if you're still with me, if you've managed to sit out all these, well, what is it, 55 minutes now of me rambling around and rambling about random shit and trying to justify myself to you, then we can get into the breakdown itself. I've kind of like spoken about certain concepts that would play a role in the actual fight, but as I've stated before, anything could happen in this fight. It's one of those, the sample size is just so small. It's generally really small in MMA, like overall, but it's especially small as heavyweight, because normally whenever a new exciting prospect comes out, he just beats up all the fat guys, and then you're left with two guys who are kind of decent. But before that, a word about Stipe Miocic. I think that people talk about Cyril Gane like he's this. I saw someone's comment where they said that Cyril Gane is a better striker than Stipe Miocic, and I just do not agree with that at all. Because, I mean, why? Because he kicks? Because he switches stances? It's just the most rudimentary idea of striking possible. It's not about the tools that you have, it's about the depth of your skill set. You could have like a jab and a right hand. It doesn't mean that you're gonna be a shitty fighter, it's just that it's the way you use them. Stipe Miocic has become one of the greatest heavyweights of all time by having two big honking fists, a double leg, and a will of iron. And that will has allowed him to come up with clever ways to not be dissuaded by like tough matchups or anything else like that. He just had the will to improve, and he had the will to utilize his minimalist skill set in smart and clever ways to beat fighters who are just as powerful as him, bigger than him, more powerful than him, or fighters who have one area of skill where they outmatch him. Doesn't matter. He improved. He came up with strategies. They were simple. They were kind of basic. There was this weirdness with Daniel Cormier, but you rarely see this at heavyweight, and that's why he stood out. I just want to see more of that. It just kind of feels fitting that when Francis Ngannou has beaten Stipe Miocic in such an emphatic fashion by improving and actually trying to be a competent fighter, it's just paints a nice picture. It's a cool story. It's a nice story. It would be cool if it played out, but this is fighting, and rarely does what you want actually play out like you would like it to play out. You don't always get what you want. That's basically what I'm saying. Anyway, the fight. Let's look at both competitors. Cyril Gane, very quick-footed, has an eye has a bit of an educated jab. He knows how to use his jab in clever ways. Knows how to use kicks in tandem with that jab. Not exactly like the best outfighter. I believe that Stipe Miocic was the way better outfighter. Purely because, he's actually had a pocket threat with which to that kind of like curtailed the desire of other fighters to barge into range, so he was free to pot shot at them and then follow up on those pot shots, on those jabs and low kicks with like a thunderous right hand. It was really cool to see. And here Cyril Gane, he's able to kind of stifle other people's offense with his own offense, and he kind of like his jabs, his needling jabs and his side kicks are annoying enough that they kind of like lull fighters into passivity. They start hanging around on the outside and he's free to pick at them. That's the basis of his style. Has really good, powerful body kicks, off stun switches. If he went If he went for those body kicks more often, I'd be more on board. But as it stands, he doesn't. If he were to mix in a high kick, on top of that, if he were to kind of like play around with his stun switches and wrap those head kicks around guards the way that Robert Whittaker does them, that'd be cool. Could be cool if he does if he were to do that against Francis Ngannou. But again, the old habits of sparring with Francis Ngannou could kind of mess with him in that sense. He could be more. He could in a sense like sort of deign to kind of like toy with him at range. It could serve. It could play out in two ways. It could either basically like fuck him, the old habit, because Francis Ngannou may be improved enough where it doesn't matter anymore, or because it was sparring and Francis Ngannou couldn't punch full force, Cyril Gane will try to spar with him and get knocked out for it. Like, for example, he will start doing like the sidekick thing and needling jab thing, and Francis Ngannou will just kind of like slip and counter, throw a right hand, or they just low kick him, you know. But he's reasonably strong in the clinch, fairly decent in there. Fenua, I think, talked about this on the preview pod. I haven't listened to it, but he said to me that Fenua and Dan told me that Fenua's idea was that Cyril Gane can try out the clinch early on and see if he can move Francis in there, if he can mess with Francis in the clinch. That would be a good idea. If he's able to do that, he should stick to it. Elbow him and breaks, that kind of stuff. Knee him, wear him out, and then like run away with a decision. Because I'm not sure that Cyril Gane can finish Francis Ngannou. I just don't see it with Francis Ngannou's chin. If you go back and watch his rematch against Stipe Miocic lands one of the most powerful right-hand counters you'll ever see. Very clean, right on the either the jaw or the temple. Francis Ngannou like wobbles a bit. This convinces Stipe Miocic that he should run in and finish the job. Gets countered with a really tight left hook, goes out. So, and Cyril Gane would being as I suppose not as I don't want to say defensively minded, but I would say that he's a safety first kind of fighter. Don't think he will risk it. I mean, the smart thing here, I mean, if he were more powerful, if he actually had knockout power, the smart thing would have been to try and knock Francis Ngannou out early, maybe. Or late. Try and lame it out. It's just, it's dangerous and not exactly doable, and against a power threat like Ngannou's, it seems counterintuitive. It seems dumb to try and finish Francis Ngannou early, but catching people cold is a thing. It's a thing that happens. But initiating wrestling, not so sure. Initiating grappling is another thing entirely. He could try and shoot and then try to kind of like grind it out. Maybe hit a sweep and kind of like hold Francis Ngannou down, but I don't think it's possible. Not sure how their physical attributes stack up with each other. Because, they're both huge. They're both really strong. They both look incredibly strong and have looked incredibly strong against different opponents. But I'm convinced that Francis Ngannou is stronger of the two. So, clinching and grappling with him, maybe in spurts, but not certainly. But trying to prolong it, I don't think it will work. I think it will backfire really badly. The one avenue I see for Gane is that if he is able to lull Ngannou into the same like low volume fight as we saw against Ngannou against Derek Lewis, and he would kind of like it's kind of like Rosenstrucking both ways. Ngannou could run at Gane and Rosenstruck him, and Gane could Rosenstruck Ngannou by kind of like lulling him into a sense of passivity and kind of like pot-shotting at him and running away with the decision. It would be really boring and lame, but he could do that. I'm speaking about Cyril Gane as I see him now. Not the hypothetical Cyril Gane that could show up and kind of like throw crazy high kicks and style on Francis Ngannou. As for Francis Ngannou himself, I would say that low kicks would be the word of the day for him. They should be the word of the day for him. Punish the stunt switches with low kicks. Low kick the shit out of him to stifle his movement. Play on his ring craft. Press him to the fence. Cut the cage. Francis Ngannou has shown a willingness to throw to the body. He could show that look again. Definitely a good idea. Great idea. Right straight to the body along the fence. Because when you press someone to the fence, you actually square him up. Because to circle out, they would have to... The smart way to circle out is to do an L step and then skip out. And so he could, when they skip out, they're squared up and you can throw to the body with impunity. Either wide rights to the body, wide lefts to the body, straights to the body, that kind of stuff. And jabs to the body, certainly. Great look. Saw it against Stipe. Jab to the head, jab to the body, overhand. Excellent look, excellent combo. Works like a charm. Also disguises, level changes. If Francis Ngannou decides to wrestle offensively, covers up the shot nicely. The way Cyril Gane tends to do the Gustafsson, where he kind of turns his back and runs out with his, ducking his head, kind of pretty easy to intercept. Just kind of either a leaping left hook or just cutting him off or staying on top of him. And while he runs, you can just simply run after him and then hit him while he can't see you, while his back is turned. Saw that against JDS where he threw his stupid rainbow overhand and then missed, kind of sort of toppled over, and then Ngannou chased him and then clattered him in the temple while his back was turned. Saw that, could do that. The thing is, with the type of ring craft that Cyril Gane has showcased during his run, is that I kind of think that Francis Ngannou could just basically run at him and throw them bungalows. It could work. I mean, not sure how durable Cyril Gane is. It could actually wear Francis Ngannou out really fast, because Cyril Gane could make him miss. He could do that. Could even hit a pivot. Cyril Gane is not incompetent with his footwork. Could duck down and pivot from underneath the bungalows, the aforementioned bungalows. So certainly, another appearance from the technical patience Francis Ngannou is warranted here, much more than your usual crazy Ngannou. The Ngannou who psyched himself out, went fuck this, and just ran at people. I don't think it is warranted here. Not a great idea. Wouldn't be a great idea, is what I'm saying. Back to the topic of the clinch. Now that I really think about it, I'm not sure Ngannou could be that adept in prolonged clinch exchanges. I know I said the opposite, but if you have the right technique, and Gane could have the right technique, if he tests the waters, if he sees whether or not if he's either stronger in the clinch or more skillful in the clinch, he could stick to the clinch. Showcase some Muay Thai looks here and there. Play around with other hooks. Play around with head control, bicep control, that kind of stuff. And find bits of offense here and there. What Ngannou has to do in this situation is to violently get out of the clinch and immediately throw off the break. Throw strikes on the break, and there Cyril Gane could conceivably be very vulnerable. Most people are very vulnerable in those exchanges where it's transitional. In those transitional exchanges where it's a phase between phases. You're exiting the clinch, and now you're entering striking. And when you throw a strike in that transitional phase, throws a lot of people off. And with Gane's defensive problems in the pocket, because conceivably Gane doesn't like pocket exchanges because his preferred range is the outside range, the kicking range. So it makes sense that he could have a defensive deficiency in there, and a left hook would play really well here. It would pay to throw the left hook in that situation. As for wrestling offensively, I'm not sure if Francis Ngannou is the type of guy who would be able to kind of like really control Gane on the ground, but we saw him actually go to a ride against Stipe and throw really like dangerous, scary strikes. And the reason why Stipe survived is, first of all, he's also a strong wrestler and could get up. Francis didn't exactly control him all that well, but he was more concerned with throwing strikes there and finishing Stipe. And Stipe's head is made out of lead, and so he didn't go out in that sequence. He went out when Francis went for a really like unexpected shifting, actually really, really tight shifting forward combination, marching combination. His feet were under him, the punches were very straight, and didn't came at weird angles. It was just a really nice, tight shifting combination. Could also play a role here. Basically, like, when I'm trying to come up with scenarios in which Gane could win this fight, it always comes back with as really boring but dominant performance, or a wonky split decision. And it would also require Ngannou to react very passively to Gane's offense, and I hope that he won't. I don't think he will, but that's what it is. I think if Ngannou wins, it will be either a finish or a really exciting fight with lots of knockdowns, or maybe a wrestlefuck, who knows. But with Cyril Gane, the only avenues I see for him are boring. A submission, perhaps, maybe, could even win the fight with submission, but this is the problem. Again, this is a fight where anything could happen, and could be really dumb or really exciting. It could turn out that Ngannou hasn't learned how to defend heel hooks. I mean, the fucking Cyril Gane rolls for a fucking Imanari. I don't know, or like chokes him out. Well, after a bungled wrestling attempt. That could also be a thing. Gane shoots, gets into a guillotine, and is unable to get out of it. Seems unlikely, but it could happen. But generally, the way I see this fight going, now that I really think about it, I think a very likely scenario is Ngannou attempts to pressure, work behind the jab and lead, but is a touch too slow to catch Gane circling out. A touch too slow. So it could end up in a decision either way, a split, where Gane wasn't able to mount any meaningful offense off his pressure behind the jab and the low kicks, and Cyril Gane has been able to ward him off on volume and body kicks, but since Cyril Gane is Cyril Gane, didn't lead to anything, wouldn't lead to a finish that way, but it would be a competitive fight, a closely contested fight that doesn't end decisively with a clear winner. That's what I'm saying. Could certainly be a possibility, but nonetheless, I'm still rooting for Francis Ngannou, and I'm picking Francis Ngannou. I'm hoping for a Ngannou knockout, a really good, well set up Ngannou knockout. That would be dope, and I'm rooting for a long title reign for Francis Ngannou. But if Cyril Gane wins, I would like to see improvement. I would like to see much improvement in areas concerning ringcraft and finishing ability and putting kicks and punches together in a way that leads to more damage. As it stands, I hope I made myself clear as to my biases and the things that drive drive me to say the things that I say in the way that I say them. Yeah, I suppose this. I could call this a preview of UFC 270, but it's more of a. The title, I suppose, would be UFC 270: Why I Root for Francis Ngannou. That would be more honest. That would make more sense. I think that I'm gonna go with it. Anyway, if you found this this podcast to not be all that interesting or all that insightful, then I apologize. There are two previews that actually concern themselves with serious analysis, serious, like, in-depth, well thought out analysis in terms of strategy and tactics. Listen to those. It's the full preview of UFC 270 by Dan and Fenio, and the other one is the Forbidden Technique podcast, hosted by Silas and Christian. Listen to those. Otherwise, I hope this was mildly fascinating, at least. Mildly interesting, not fascinating, mildly. I hope this was. Hope this made sense. Let's put it that way. Otherwise, I'm very excited for the main event. Not so much for the entirety of the card itself. Sriram Muralidharan has made a joke where he called this. He said the subtitle to this event should be. The title to this event should be UFC 270: The Dana White's Pretender Series. Because if you actually look at the card, there's like a whole bunch of like black names in black with no links, no Wikipedia pages. The rest is just mostly guys from the Contender Series. Really very top heavy card. And this is by design. The first, I would say that I would hope that I'm wrong. I would like to be proven wrong, and for most of the fights to turn out to be entertaining, and that I'm underrating the names on the card. That would be dope. But otherwise, it continues the trend that we've spoken of before, is that the UFC is kind of like becoming lazy. The ESPN deal is guaranteed revenue. They're content to put out top-heavy events and kind of like put maybe like hope for two or three, maybe even one good fight on the card, and the fans are kind of content with that, and the UFC is content with that, and I don't like that trend. I don't enjoy it. It doesn't lead to memorable events, and I really dislike this model. It makes sense for the UFC, but it doesn't benefit me as a customer, as a viewer. Anyway, I suppose that's enough of that. I guess I'm not sure about the plans for the rest of the week. There are certain, there are some. I've plugged most of the content. I've announced most of the upcoming content on the previous podcast. The one where I offer an in-depth look. That one is an actual technical post-fight breakdown of Calvin Kattar versus Giga Chikadze. If you missed that one, please go back and check it out. You may find it more enjoyable than this episode, purely on the basis of it being more of a straight-laced fight analysis podcast. But yeah, otherwise I'll see you later. I suppose I'll see you after the event. I'm working on some stuff, and we'll get to it when when I'm actually done with it. And I'm certainly going to offer a post-fight breakdown of Ngannou versus Gane. Whether or not it will be exciting, I don't know. But if it's boring, I will talk about how it's boring. If it's exciting, I'll talk about how it's exciting. That's it. Yeah. All right. Somehow I managed to... I hope I've done a decent enough job of explaining myself to you, and I've done a decent enough job of actually breaking down the fight. All right, I'm off. Got my first jab of... I'm starting... I've revaccinated today, halfway there. Got my first jab. I'm kind of starting to feel the side effects. Or maybe I'm just hungry, so I'm fucking off. I gotta go. All right, see ya. God, never know how to end these, do I?